Earlier this week, my team launched this admin UI for AWS Amplify, and I wanted to do a tutorial on building an application with it. So I'm going to build a blog out with posts and comments. I'm at sandbox.amplifyapp.com, and I'll link all these things down in the description, but I'll click Get Started on this left-hand side for Create an App Backend. And then I'm going to start with data. And click there. I'm going to start with a blank schema, so I'll just select this one. But if you want to start from somewhere, you can select to-do list or blog here. Then you can click Add to add a model. And I'll do post with content and title, because each blog post will have text and a title associated with it. I'm going to reorder those as well. And then I'm going to also add a comment. And for the comment, I'll add text and author. I'm going to add a relationship between them because I want my post to have comments. And one post will have many comments. I'll just name it comments with a lowercase c. I can also make these fields required just by focusing on them and clicking is required. So I'm going to make it so that text and author is required and title and content are required. You can also make them into arrays. So if I wanted to do like a tag or something along those lines, I could make that an array field. Once I do that, I'm going to click Test locally in your app. So I've done all of this so far without an AWS account, and you can keep working without an AWS account and test this all locally, this backend that you just built the schema out for. It's also going to give you instructions for integrating your backend into different platforms. So there's web, iOS, Android, and then there's React, Angular, Vue. It came pre-select on web, React, and that's where I'm going to stay just because that's what I do most. But if you do mobile or a different framework, feel free to select one of those and you'll get specific instructions for that framework. I'll say next. Then it gives me instructions for creating a new React app. So I'm going to go into my terminal here, and I am going to create a React app. And I'm going to call this Amplify Admin Blog. You can use whatever app name you want that makes sense to you. Okay, and then I'm going to cd into that directory that was created. If you're just getting started with React, I have a full tutorial on that, and I will link it in one of the cards on the screen just so that you can get a basis in React before doing this. But again, if you're more comfortable with different framework, almost all of this applies other than the React specific code. So the next step is to install the Amplify CLI. I already have it installed, so I'm going to skip over this step. But if you have used the Amplify CLI before to create an Amplify app, it's the same. So it's really nice that you can still use all of those same features and extend your app using those. I'm also going to run this Amplify pull command with this sandbox ID. And this is going to link my front end to my backend that I just created through this admin UI. There are two dependencies that I need, and I will go ahead and install those. AWS Amplify will give me access to a bunch of functions and such that I can use to connect my app to Amplify more easily. And then TypeScript is required because the models that are generated are in TypeScript. So that's just required for this React app. I'm going to open up my text editor and also start my React server. So once I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and open up my index.js file, and you can see that there are 3 lines of code to copy and paste in. This will configure Amplify for my project. And then for now, I'm just gonna work with the post model. And what I'm gonna do is copy this, create here. I'm gonna clear out what's already in this app file. And then what I'm going to do, and this is a sneaky workaround that I just learned from one of my colleagues, it's really smart, is to use window.prompt instead of building out your own forms for demos. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So what I will do is create a button here. So button, create post, and on click, I'm going to create post. I'm going to create a function here. And I'm going to create an object to store this new post that I want to create. So const post equals content window.prompt blog post content, and I'm also going to add the title. And so now it's just in that post object, but what I'm going to do is you can see that there is some code that's generated for you back in the Amplify window. So I'm going to copy this. And I am going to, instead of this object here, just use that post that I created right there. So it's going to await datastore.save with my new post. And I'm going to need to make this asynchronous. Awesome. So now that that's done, so I'm going to store that to a variable to make sure that this is working. I'll open up my console here and create a post. And click OK, and you can see that one came back. So that has been stored to my backend. Right now it's not deployed, but under the hood, this is using Amplify's data store, and data store is going to make it so that you have an offline and online API that syncs between your users. So this is really helpful, especially for like mobile development when you want your app to have data accessible offline. Again, for now, it's just local. I haven't deployed it yet. I also want to make it so that when my page loads, I get a list of all of the posts that are already created. So I am going to add a use effect. So I'm going to import use state and use React. I'm going to pass an empty array to this. And what I'm going to do is switch over to this query sample right here and copy and paste this code. I'm going to need an inner function that is asynchronous. So use effect is going to run on page load. It's going to get my posts back. And then I'm going to set posts with those models that came back from that API call. Let's see how that works. I'm going to use my React Dev Tools to look at this. There's only one, and it says my test post and my test post, and that's just the one that I created here. So I'm going to loop through these and display them on the page. So now each one of my posts is going to render on the page. I added a real blog post as well, just so you can see that too. But just like that, we have tested our backend locally. We have set this up so that we can create a new post and we can pull all the posts down. And this is working without an AWS account, without deploying us or anything like that. So we're still local. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and deploy this. So I'm going to go back to the Amplify admin. Also, if I wanted to change anything in my model, I could. I would just need to change it right here in this data modeling tab and then go back to here and rerun that Amplify pull command. So this one right here with any of my changes. So once I have an API that I like, I'm going to click on deploy. And I have an AWS account, but if you need one, it'll guide you through creating a brand new one. So I'm going to log into that. And right here, you'll see that you'll be asked for an app name. I'm going to call this my Amplify admin blog, and you get to pick a AWS region for this. I'll do US East 1, but you can choose from all of them. If you're not familiar with this concept, you essentially want to pick the one that's closest to your users. So you can set this up in the future so that it actually uses multiple regions, but for a small app that nobody's really going to use, you can just pick one for now, especially in development. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy this. It will take a couple minutes to do this. I'll also link in the description more information about those regions and a map of them so you can see which one to choose. Okay, and it's deployed, so I'm going to go ahead and click on this Open Admin UI right here. Also, I want to mention that underneath the hood, this is using all AWS resources. So Data Store is using AppSync and DynamoDB. And for authentication, you're going to have access to AWS Cognito. So all of this is really powerful, and you get the same access to these services. And you get the same access to these services, but with a lot built in and given to you, so you don't have to set everything up from scratch yourself. Now that this is deployed, I'm going to click View Data Model. And you can see that my data that I created before is here. So I've got my post and my comment. I also have the ability to manage app content. So you can actually add content to your application directly in here. You don't need to necessarily build out a whole interface. And if you're adding like seed data or something like that, this could be a really good way to do that. It also has a Markdown preview tool. So if you're using Markdown for a blog or for content on your app, you can get a preview of what it's going to look like here, which is really nice. You can even create and link to comments here. And now this is deployed, so anybody can use this version of your backend. The next thing that you can do is enable authentication. And again, this is powered by Cognito under the hood. It's going to give you by default email, but you can also configure a phone number or Facebook or Google or Amazon or anything along those lines. You can even enable multi-factor authentication, so it could be off, enforced, or optional. You can also add additional attributes you want from your customers and set different password policies. I'll go ahead and save and deploy this. It's going to take a few minutes to get that live. So now that that's deployed, I can manage my users and groups similar to how I was able to manage my data. So I can click create a user and add a password for them. You can also create user groups. So I will create admin. and add a user, which I'll just add that hello at Amazon user, I can go back to this data. I can actually add authorization roles based off of those user groups. So if I change this to Cognito Pools and do change, I can make it so that only owners can update or delete their comments. Any signed in user can read comments, and admins can delete or read comments. You can really fine tune who can do what with your data. And once you're done with that, you can click Save and Deploy. One other quick thing that I want to show is that you can give users without an AWS account access to this admin UI. So if you go back to this page, you can click Admin UI Management and then invite users, and then you can add users to this admin UI. They do not need an AWS account. They don't need to create one. They don't need to have one, nothing like that. You can give them either manage only access, which will give them just access to app content. So just those create, edit, delete, all that. So once everything's done deploying, one thing that I need to do is I need to make this hook up to my deployed backend instead of my sandbox one. So I need to rerun this Amplify pull, and it's going to have this pop up, and I just need to say yes. It's going to ask me my default text editor, which is VS Code. I'm building a JavaScript React app, and I'm just going to do all the defaults. I am going to modify my backend. Amplify has these React components that you can use. They have them for other frameworks as well. And I'm going to install this. And this is going to allow me to have sign in and sign up and all that without me writing it from scratch. So that's pretty nice. So I'm going to wrap this app with Authenticator, which is a higher order component. And adding this in is going to make it so that when I get to this homepage, I can sign into my account. But if you have a developer that you want to give access to, you can click full access, and that will allow them to have full scope and edit the schemas and all that. And just like that, I have an application that has data. It's deployed on AWS, and it has full authentication built in. So this was a tutorial on how to get started with this admin UI. I will link in the description my full app that I built with this. It has like the comments as well, and React router and the styling and all of that. Just not part of the admin UI, so I'll skip that for the sake of the tutorial. But I would absolutely love to hear what you'd like to see from me in the future as far as showing this. If you have specific demo ideas or questions or feedback, please leave them below or feel free to reach out to me elsewhere on the internet. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next week.